has got to me, a unique perspective on the Farm Bill. He's got a lot of knowledge of the Farm Bill. If you remember, if you were around last year when he was here, it was just being voted on and put into play. He was reading through, I don't know how many hundreds of pages to try to put together a presentation to tell us what was coming. So again, Dr. Barnaby, to me, has got a pretty unique perspective on the Farm Bill. He grew up on a farm in Kansas. I believe that's why he can talk to us and talk at a realistic level that makes sense for us on this Farm Bill. There's a lot of different pieces that come into play, a lot of different pricing mechanisms that come into play. And with his background, I think you're going to hopefully take something out of here today that's of benefit. I know a lot of you have been to FSA meetings. That's good to me. I've been to 2 or 3 different meetings. I pick up something out of every meeting, hopefully that's of benefit. So Dr. Barnaby is very well educated. He's been through a lot of different universities, now a professor at Kansas State University. He's been very implemental in the crop insurance. For those that remember, I think CRC started in 1995 in the state of Iowa and came up this direction in 1996. Dr. Barnaby was very implemental in building the CRC policy that we started with for revenue coverage. So he's also had a lot of excellence awards in helping put out this information through his marketing, through his training, and through his education across the state of Kansas. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Art and go through, and I know he's open for questions, and we'll narrow that down, unlike some other meetings where you can't ask questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Art.
Okay, is that sound okay? And I assume you're here for the recording, is that okay?
Yep, that's good,
Yep.
thanks.
All right, good enough. It is good to be here. I am with Kansas State University. I've already been asked this morning, do I have any other ties other than this one? I do, but they're also purple. And I will also tell you that I am color challenged. All of my shirts are purple. Lynn probably thinks I'm wearing the same shirt that he saw me in last night. I assure you it is a clean shirt that came from the laundry, but it is exactly the same color. There's only one color in Manhattan, and that is purple. We did make it to a bowl game, and kind of like you folks, we didn't come out where we wanted to come out. I was down at the bowl game in San Antonio. It was miserable, wet, and cold outside. That game was inside, so the game itself came off well and had a good time. Hopefully we'll turn it around next year and things will move up, which is kind of interesting when you have a 9-win season and that's not quite good enough. You always think you have to move higher. What we're here today to talk about is the Farm Bill, and I will concentrate strictly on the farm commodity programs. As mentioned, I've also, at least a big chunk of my work has been on crop insurance and managing risk. I even do a workshop where I combine through a case study. And you have to be really motivated to go through that workshop because it's all day. But combining options, futures, forward contracts, and insurance and commodity programs, putting together a whole farm risk strategy and simulate steady from the standpoint to draw different yields and different prices to generate the outcome. I think Minnesota does something very similar. Anyway, let's move on. First of all, this is our disclaimer. Makes our attorneys happy. I'm giving you the best information I have today, but I can tell you now, there have already been some changes in the program that FSA has made after the fact. I don't rule that out in the future, so whatever we have today, if we learn something new in the future, we will put it out, and where it'll show up in our case is on this website, agmanager.info. Someone came up to me after the meeting last night and said, well, I couldn't find the address of your web page. And normally, I plaster it everywhere. I mean, I've got it about 15 different places. Apparently, this is the only place that shows up in the handout that you have. So if for some reason you want to go back to that web page, there is the address, agmanager.info. Two things that you need to deal with is the decision whether to update your program yields and whether to reallocate your base. These are two independent decisions. The last time you could update the base was, I believe, 2002, something like that. And at that time, you couldn't update your payment yield unless you reallocate your base. This time, you don't have to reallocate your base to update your payment yield. I can think of no reason you wouldn't update your payment yield. Now, if you can't show a higher yield, and it's based on the yields that were produced in 8 through 12, if those yields are not higher than your current payment yield, which you got a letter, and I think it said CC program yield on it, that gave you your current yield. If you can't prove a yield higher than that, then you simply don't update the yield. So you're going to get the higher of the two. Now, you may go into a farm program that doesn't use that value. You still want to update the payment yield because it may be another 10 or 15 years before you're allowed to update them again. And that yield goes with the land. So if the land sells, it's going to put different value in that land. Or if it changes tenants, it's going to change the value of the land. So by all means, I can't think of any reason not to do that. Reallocating the base is based on what you planted through 9 through 12. As a general statement, I think most of you will find it to your advantage if you're reallocating is you reallocate if you can increase your corn base acres. Now, you can't just go in and say, well, I've looked at the numbers and I'd like to have 100% corn base. No, you can't do that. All you can do is update based on what you planted during this period of time. Now, if you weren't planting any soybeans from 9 through 12, you planted the whole place to corn, then you could do it. The other thing is that this is farm serial number by farm serial number. So if you got more than one farm serial number, and many of you do, then you can reallocate one farm and not another. In other words, the decisions are basically by farm serial number, so they're independent of each other. On these two decisions, I would encourage you to go ahead and do those now. I don't see any reason at all to wait. There's no more information going to come out between now and sign up. So I would get this out of the way. It has an earlier close date, February the 28th. I don't anticipate that will get extended either. So you really want to get these two things done now. Down to the commodity program itself, you're going to elect one of 3 programs. And the reason they say elect is because even though you elect one of these programs and you're locked into that program for 5 years, you still have to re-enroll every year. Now, you may think that sounds stupid, I've already picked the program, but the reason is the land can change hands between years, tenants change, etc. That's why you have to go into FSA and re-enroll every year. Enrollment, probably, we don't know for sure, I don't know even post date, but probably enrollment will run clear up to probably the 1st of September. But the key decision is which program you elect. After that, the re-enrollment is simply signing paperwork. It's basically, that's what it is, paperwork. But you have to do it. So, the price loss coverage is simply a price guarantee. It's the difference between the reference price and the target, what we used to call target price. But it's the difference between the reference price and the national average price. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time discovering how they determine that national average price. Because that gives you a lot of information about which one of these programs are likely to pay and which ones are not likely to pay, at least based on your forecasted prices. So this is strictly a price guarantee. It's multiplied times that updated payment yield. The ARC county program is based on county numbers. It's basically 86% of the expected county revenue is your guarantee, and the county revenue that's generated, county yield times national average price, that revenue counts against the guarantee, you pay the net difference. With the agricultural risk individual, this is basically the same program except it's using your yields, not county. Your yields and the national average price. And it is very much like a crop insurance program with one caveat. You only get paid on 65% of the base acres. These other programs pay on 85% of the base acres. So there's a pretty serious discount to go to individual. I should also mention that if you don't enroll in ARC, you are eligible for the supplemental coverage. This is additional coverage on top of your existing crop insurance contract. In my view, in the Corn Belt and even in the Great Plains, what I'm finding, given the cost of this supplemental coverage, I think a better option is to move your coverage, if you're not already there, to 80 or 85% coverage. If you're at 80% coverage, there's only 6 points of coverage coming from this SCO. So I don't know if that's going to really influence your decision. Are you going to turn down a government payment so that you can buy 6 points more coverage on your crop insurance? And remember, the crop insurance decision is an annual one. You can change it in future years, market changes, etc. If you want to change what you go into, the premiums are obviously going to change from year to year, and you may change now. And it's not that you have to be in price loss. That's usually how it's presented. I'll give you an example. Suppose, and I'm going to use a wheat example, you're 100% wheat base, and we have a lot of those in Kansas and Oklahoma, 100% wheat base. Well, in that environment, you enroll in the Ark County Wheat Program, and you have those base acres. You can plant corn on those wheat base acres, and you will still get the wheat payment. You will not get a corn payment. Doesn't matter what you plant. But because the corn's not enrolled in ARC, those folks can buy SCO on their corn because it's not enrolled in ARC. So there's an example of how you might be in a situation where you're not PLC and you're not in ARC either, but you're still eligible to buy the SCO. I really think you seriously got to sit down with your crop agent and look at just going to higher coverage levels. First of all, this is triggered on county. That crop insurance payment is based on what happens on your farm. It's also based on futures prices, as is that one. So, you probably thought you could come to this meeting from AgWest and they're going to give you free lunch, right? Are you giving them free lunch? They are giving you free lunch. Now, you get a free lunch. What a heck of a deal. As one farmer told me, I can eat free every day during the wintertime. All I have to do is pick the right meetings to go to. I don't know if you checked out Monsanto. They might have had better lunch. You might want to check that out. But nonetheless, no, you're not going to just get to sit here all day. I expect you to work today. And you see there's a worksheet set in front of you that looks like a test. We're going to go through the worksheet and explain how these numbers end up in the computer program. So hopefully at the end of the day, you can walk out here and hand calculate all of these payments. Or at least we'll get you a long ways down the road. I'm going to start with the price loss coverage program, which is the simplest one. First of all, notice it's the same farm being used through all three programs. So all the farm data is the same so that you can compare across the programs. And in this particular farm, he has 550 acres of corn base, 450 acres of soybean base, a total of 1,000 acres of crop base, but he's planting 1,200 acres of crops. In other words, he has 200 acres that have no base on it. If you only had 1,000 acres of base when this program started, that's all you're going to have when it ends. You cannot build base. If you don't take anything else out of here today, remember that. You cannot build base. You got CRP ground that's coming back into production. If that CRP ground has base, then you will get to bring that base in. So I guess that's one exception to that rule. But if that CRP ground has no base, then it will never have base. It will come back in with no base, and there's no way you can build base. So, anyway, in this case, he has 200 acres that has no base. As far as how he's actually planting, because you don't have to plant necessarily what's, in fact, you don't have to plant what your base is. He's planting 800 acres of corn and 400 acres of soybeans for a total of 1,200. His payment yield on the corn is 170 bushels that he's updated, 40 bushels for the sorghum, again, the soybeans that he has updated. The reference price for corn is $3.70, and that is fixed in law. That's in the law itself. It will not change during the life of the farm. For soybeans, that number is $8.40. For wheat, it's $5.50. It will not change during the life of the farm bill. Okay? The loan rates also are fixed. And then we get down to this thing called the marketing year average price, which we are going to spend a lot of time on because it's a key variable. Right now, I've got, for the example that we're working through, I've got $3.60 corn and $10 soybeans. We don't know either number today. You won't know what the corn price is until about the 1st of October of 2015. And that's for the 14 crop, okay? Why is that? The national average price is based on national average cash prices weighted by sales volume for the entire marketing year. The marketing year for corn and soybeans starts on September 1 and ends on August 31st. So for the 14th crop that you just harvested, the marketing year started on the 1st of September and will not end until August 31st of 2015. At that point, NASS is the one that does this, the USDA. They will total up the sales, the prices that they have surveyed from the various grain buyers, Cargill, those folks, and come up with this weighted national average price. There's only one price for the country. There's not multiple wheat prices either. There's only one wheat price, this 5-month national average price. So this 360 is not a forecast of that price. I will give you a forecast of that price, but that is not the forecast price. It's simply a way to work through the example calculations. This number here, again, is just for the example. It is not a forecast. So, looking at the PLC program, in red is the formula. So, the corn payment rate is the reference price minus the maximum of the NYE price for the loan rate. Well, in this case, the reference price is $3.70, and you subtract from that the $3.60, which is our national average price. Okay? Now, anybody remember the efficiency program? Remember what the target price was for corn? $2.75. $2.75. How did it work? You had a target price $2.75. The national average price was lower. You got paid the difference. Remember the efficiency program? This works exactly the same way. All they did is rename things. Just rename things. So there's nothing new here. This is not complicated. This program is not complicated. And that 370 number doesn't change. It will be fixed during the life of the farm bill. Now, the 360 number, that's that national average price that you won't know until the 1st of October, and it will change every year. So, in this example, what's my payment rate? 10 cents. Good, good. The whole group wore their helmets to football practice. That's what I like to hear. So everybody got the right answer. Great. All right. So we move on, and we plug in the 10 cents, and we move on, and we take the 10 cents, and then we're going to multiply times the program yield, right? And that program yield's the one you updated. So what do you come up with for a payment? Well, it's 10 cents times 170 bushel program yield, and so he's going to get $17 per payment acre. Now, he doesn't get paid on all of his acres, right? But for 17 bucks, okay? Now, we take that corn payment of $17, right? And that $17, we then multiply it times the 550 corn base acres. How many acres did we plant? 800, it doesn't matter. That's the correct answer, thank you. He planted 800 acres, but you only get paid on the 550 acres of corn base, even though he planted 800 acres of corn, okay? So we multiply the 17 bucks times the 550 acres of base, not the 800 planted, times the 85% factor, and the 85% factor here is fixed in the law. It won't change during the life of the farm bill. It's fixed. That won't change. The 550 base acres of corn, that's not going to change either. Once you updated that, reallocate your base, that's it. You're done. That will be locked in too. And in this case, we come up with a payment of $7,947. Let me get a drink of water while I'm doing that. Somebody figure out the soybean payment for me. Got it? Oh, I heard it over here. Where you at? What'd you say? 0. I'll bet you thought high school should have only taken 2 years. But you're always waiting on the guys who didn't go to practice with their football helmets. And you had to wait on them to catch up. I understand that. But in any case, yes, it is in fact 0. Why is it 0? Exactly. Thank you. Higher than the reference price. The reference price is $8.40. The national average cash price, in our example, is 10 bucks. because it's higher, that would actually work out to a negative number. At least they cap it at 0. Now, you may think that's stupid, but actually there were people proposing those kind of schemes where you would combine the whole farm together, and the ARC actually works that way. The ARC individual actually works that way. But if you combine the whole farm together, then that would cut down the size of your payment here. Now, they don't combine it together if you go with the county program. If you go individual, they do combine all your crops together. So soybean gains can offset corn losses, and you end up with no payment. So we need to be aware of that. Okay, moving on. It is in fact 0 and total up the numbers, then we come up. And if I go things through too fast, don't worry about it. Just on Ag Manager yesterday, I have posted a video. I didn't post it. People back in Manhattan posted a video where I go through these worksheets. And there's a separate video for PLC, which we just went through. It's only about 5 minutes long. There's a separate video for this program and a separate video for the individual part. And the beauty there is working the same example, but if you didn't quite understand something, you can stop the tape, you can back it up, you can review it. You only have to look at the tapes that you didn't understand. If you understand everything was understand about PLC, no reason to look at that again. You're not going to get anything new. But let's start with this county and see how this would work. The 2009 price, you notice that was the low price there, because what it is the Olympic average price times the Olympic average yield times 86% gets you to the guarantee. So at 355, notice that that's less than the reference price of 370. Less than the reference price of 370. So the first thing we do is we eliminate the 355 number and replace it with the 370 number. Everybody see that? It'll never be less than the reference price. It'll never be less than the reference price. Period. Okay? Now, next thing we got to do is eliminate the high and low price. Well, the low price is still 370, is it not? So we eliminate that one. And we have to eliminate the high price, which is the 2012 year. That leaves 3 prices left. You're going to sum those 3 prices, add them up, and divide by 3. That's how you get to Olympic average. You drop the high and you drop the low. Do you like that price distribution? Pretty much. It could be better. How could it be better? If the 689 number were in 13, it would actually be better. If it were in 13 rather than 12, you would have that 689 in your price distribution through the entire life of the farm bill. As it is, it will not be there in the last year of the farm bill. In the last year of the farm bill. On the other hand, we're dropping the low price out in the very first year. We're dropping the low price out in the very first year. So what you'd like to have is the low yield in 09, high yield in 13, low price in 09, high price in 13. That would be the ideal distribution because it stays in the distribution longer and it is a 5-year program. Okay, now, over on the yield side, we discover we got an 80 bushel crop here in 2012. Must have been Illinois. You guys all had 225 bushels, I'm told, in that year. Is that right? You don't think somebody's been pulling my big leg just because I'm out of town and I'm gullible and I'm used to 100 bushels. You see 80 bushels is a good crop where I'm from. But up here, 80 is not so good. Well, you don't have to use 80. You get 70% of the tea yield. We have been round and round and round and round on this tea yield. It's not been published. And we're told that it now, I just got this within the last 3 days, the tea yield is in fact the crop insurance tea yield where available. Now they don't have it in every county, so FSA has had to go through and fill in tea yields in counties that don't have it. The second problem is crop insurance has multiple tea yields, especially on things like soybeans. And you know, everything from organic soybeans versus intertilled rows and all that sort of stuff. Different tea yields for soybeans. FSA will have 1 tea yield in that county, period. 1 tea yield. If they split it between irrigated and dryland, in that case they will have 2 tea yields, irrigated and dryland, but that's their only split. So in most counties you're only going to have 1 tea yield. And so then you look at the RMA tea yields and you discover there's multiple tea yields depending on what kind of soybeans or what kind of corn being planted, you know, the high lysine corn, They, what's the other one, blue corn, that makes sense? Purple? Anyway, there are different classes of corn, and they have different tea yields for those in some counties. The point is, FSA is going to have one tea yield. So then you got to figure out which one it is, and which one are they using, and then of course the word it's missing, they got to fill it in. Hopefully at some point that will come out, but right now, we don't necessarily know what it is. In this particular county, it is 109 bushels, which is 70% of that tea yield number, and it's 109 bushels. So because it's higher than the actual yield produced in that county, again, these are all county yields, we replace it with the 109. We do the same thing, we throw out the high and low, and the high year, or the low year, turns out is still our 109, and our high year is the 190. Now that distribution doesn't work quite as well, does it? Because that 12-year yield is going to be in this program all but the last year of the program. So if you get another low yield, see, that's going to really hit you, because you already got one low yield in the distribution. Okay? So we have that one in there, and it's going to be in there. Unfortunately, the 190, which is the high number, that's going to drop out after the first year. So in this case, you see, you got a yield, Olympic average yield this year, and even if the price doesn't change on corn, and I'm forecasting it won't, even though we got the same price on corn this year as we do next year, the guarantee in this example would actually go down because the Olympic average yield is going to be lower. Okay? So it's a combination of the two, and the answer changes whichever county you're in and what the distribution of their yields look like in that county. I actually have those pulled together for the whole country, but I don't have them posted yet. Anyway, we plug in the prices. I've got two of them put in. We put in the 446, which is the 13 price. Those are the prices we do in strike through. We add them up, divide by 3, and you'll come up with 529. I didn't round that number, and it throws the rest of the numbers off a little bit. If you try to go through with hand calculation, you'll get a slightly different answer with 529, because that number is not rounded. As I said, this didn't show up until we did the videos, and Robin Reed, which I will leave you with her email address, she's the one that reviewed the video, and she hand calculated them as she was going through the video and came up with a slightly different answer. It's all because that number was not rounded. It didn't seem worth the time, well, I didn't have the time to redo the video, but other than that, it'll work. You should be fine. We then do the same thing with the yields. We throw out the high and low, and these are the remaining 3 yields. We divide by 3, and we have 143 bushels, okay? The marketing year average price of 529, we bring that down into our equation to calculate the benchmark revenue. So it comes right into there, and we have 529, which is marketing year average price, times 143 bushels, and that gives us $755.99. That is the benchmark revenue. Okay, call it 755, because the rounding will change it a little bit, a few pennies. Anyway, the next thing, you'll notice that this program has a 10% stop loss. Anybody remember what the stop loss was in the acre program? Anybody? 25%. 25%. If this number was not 10, but 25, this is a whole new program. In fact, you can go home right now. Well, you don't want to go home now because you had free lunch. But as soon as you have lunch, you just want to go home now because game over. This is your program if you have 25% stop loss. Unfortunately, they put in 10% stop loss. And that really limits how much you can collect under this program. And under some scenarios, you can collect more under the PLC. We'll get to that number in a minute. So this is the factor that complicated things. It's 10% of the benchmark. Originally, I thought it was 10% of the guarantee. Well, that would be an even lower number. But it's 10% of the benchmark, which is the gross expected revenue. So it's 10% of the $755 number. And we end up with $75.60. That $75.60, that number right there for this farm is the maximum payment. You can't get paid more than this under any conditions, under no conditions. Maximum payment. It stops out 10% of the reference revenue. The guarantee is 86% of the reference revenue. So we're going to bring this reference revenue and plug it into the slot right here. And we're going to multiply by the 86%, and we'll come up with a guarantee of $650.15. You will then pay the difference between the revenue to count, which will be the county yield times the national average price, which you will not know until when? October 1st of 2015. 9 months from now, before you'll know the exact number. So, at this point, we are forecasting in our example. Again, this is not my forecast, this is just for the example. We're plugging in 360 as our expected price next fall. If it's 360, and if the county raises 150 bushel yield, again, that's the county yield, it's not your farm, county yield, then you multiply those two numbers together and you have $540 worth of revenue to count against the guarantee. Our guarantee is $650.15, okay? So we deduct from it the revenue that was produced, $540, again, all at the county level, and you come up with a difference of $110. The difference between those two numbers, $110. Do you get paid $110? No, you don't. Why not? Because of the stop loss, yes. So you get the lesser of the calculated value of the 10% limit, and in this case, the difference, the lesser value is the $75.60, so that's what goes in the slot. And you multiply it times the 550 base acres, not the acres that were planted. 800 were planted, but you multiply times the base acres times 85%. Again, that 85% is in the law. It will not change, okay? And you end up with a revenue of $35,000, or payment of $35,342 in this example. Okay, I'm going to leave the soybeans for you to calculate on your own. They work exactly the same way, just different numbers. And if you need more help, remember, all of these are on agmanager.info, and they've all been through review and editing and that sort of thing for you to follow through, and you can move as fast or as slow as you would like. So I'm going to skip through the soybean ones, and I will give you down here at the bottom, we end up with a payment on the soybeans following the same procedure of $16,475. You might want to write down this number here, $51,817 as a check figure if you plan to go through and see if you can come up with soybean numbers. So you should come up with that number when you go through and do the soybean calculations. So it's a check figure, and if you don't get there, maybe you want to go look at the tape. All right, moving on to our individual. Had Congress stopped right here, this would not have been a difficult program. This would not have been a difficult program. There really is nothing new there. This is strictly acre, rather than using state yield or using county yield, and that 10% stop loss, that's the other big item. That was for budget reasons, that's why it's 10 and not 25. And the PLCs just like the efficiency of the program. The southern folks wanted PLC primarily because the expectation of like $100 an acre going to be paid rice as a result under PLC. There's not much difference in the price that they set. The corn price is relatively low at $3.70. Okay. In any case, they did put this individual. The reason it's here is because the senator from Montana, caucus, wanted it, and they had to have the votes. And the wheat growers in Montana wanted it, and the reason is, what do you grow in Montana for the most part, particularly the eastern part? Wheat. What else do you grow? Summer crop. Wheat, summer crop. That's it. So, number one, they got records every year. It's the same crop. The point being is all crops are combined together. But if you only have wheat on that farm, then it still is just one crop. If you're diversified and you got corn and you got soybeans and you got wheat, some of those crops make and others don't, it could well take you out of the payment because you get a high enough revenue from one of those crops to offset the revenue lost in the other crops. So the less diversified you are, the better the individual coverage will work for you. As a general statement, also, you need to be able to show higher revenue, and that's primarily due to a higher yield. That's not the whole story. There's a lot of different combinations that work through these things. Anyway, let's take a look at kind of how this thing's put together. Again, the same case farm being used. The other difference is, remember the county program is the average county price, the national, Olympic average national price times the Olympic county yield. Okay? One other little caveat before I leave that. What determines the county yields used is the county that your farm is administered from. If you've got a county land in Wright County, and you're here, this Redwood, right? And you're here in Redwood, and Wright County is one of your farms, and it's being administered out of this office, then they're going to use the county yields from here, not where your land is located. Not where your land is located. Now, that's all over the board. Typically, it's contiguous counties, but it's not required. You can actually have counties that are further away than that, and they're still administered out of this office. But it's where they're administered from determines the county yield, not where the farm is actually located. And that could give you an unusual outcome. It could actually go both ways. Now, this program is based on your individual farm yield. So if it's in a different county, that's the yield we're talking about. Doesn't matter. Second thing is it's Olympic average revenue rather than Olympic average price and Olympic average yield. And because of that, you don't get necessarily the same number. First of all, it's just like the other program. The 355 is a low price, so we're going to replace it with 370. Then what you do is you take the 370 and you're going to multiply it times the 200 bushels that you produced on that farm in 2009. So it's your yield, it's not the county, times the 370 because that's higher than the 355. It's the higher of the two prices. And that ends up giving you a revenue for that year of $740. You do the same thing with all the other years. Notice that in 12, he did not plant corn on this farm serial number. So what goes in there is the higher of the 77T or the county yield. And in this case, the county yield is 120 bushels. Now, as a general rule, for this to work in your favor, you need a yield higher than what the county is. So right away, if you're going to go into this program, you really want to plant some of that crop every year so that you're not putting the county yield into your yield distribution. Make sense? You want to have a yield every year produced on your farm, particularly if we're assuming that it's higher. Okay? If you don't, you're going to plug in the county yield, and if you do enough years of that, all of a sudden you are the county yield, and you're not getting the benefit of it. But you multiply the 120 times the 689 price, and the revenue in that year works out to $826.80, even though your actual revenue was zero. That's what the calculated revenue is. And you then do the same procedure. You throw out the high and the low. Well, the high is real easy to pick out. It's the $1,100 number, and the low is here in 2011. And that's kind of a mixed distribution because the big number is going to be in the distribution for the first 3 years of the Farm Bill, but the last two will not be there, the $1,100. That will drop out. Our low price years are going to drop out, well, except for 13. See, that's low too. But 13 will be in there for the life of the Farm Bill. And hopefully you don't get any more low revenues if you're typically producing 190 bushels, okay? And of course, that's this guy's average, isn't it? I'm raising 190 bushels, isn't that my average? I mean, that's what I expect, right? Even though the math doesn't show that, my average is 190. It's whatever my high yield is, that's my average. You ask a farmer, what's my yield? What's he going to tell you? Is he going to tell you 100 in this example? Or 125? No, he's going to tell you 190. Yeah. Hey, that's the way we all think. On the soybean side, notice that all the prices are higher than the reference price at 840. You do have a yield substitution there on the 20 bushels. That's going to get replaced with the 29. Same story, throw out the high and the low revenue, and you average remaining 3. So that comes out to $463 for the soybean, $715 for the corn. Then it's where it gets complicated. We have to prorate the revenue and the revenue to count by the crop acres that were planted. So for corn, we planted 800 acres. We have a total of 1,200. There's only 1,000 acres of base, but 1,200. So what we're doing is prorating everything back to that 1,000 bushel base. And that's where this program really gets nasty to deal with, particularly if you got more than 2 crops, okay? Now, at this point, that's 67% for the corn, and it's 400 planted acres of soybeans divided by 1,200 acres of total program crops gives you a third to the soybeans. We then take this corn ratio there of 67% for the corn, and we multiply it times the corn benchmark number, which is $715. And so our reference revenue that's been prorated is $477 for the corn. I already see guys glazing over. Yeah, I didn't dream this up. This is the way it is. And if you want to use this program, you really want to understand what you're signing on for, then you need to keep in mind all these ratios, and they're going to change every year, are they not? Because you're going to plant different crops in different years. This is not a decoupled program, in my estimation, because your guarantee is going to change based on what you plant. Next year, if you flip this over and you plant 800 acres of soybeans, 400 acres of corn, you're going to have a different guarantee.
Dr. Barnaby, could you repeat what you just said? It's not a what program?
It's not a decoupled program because it matters what you plant. It matters what you plant. So if next year we plant 400 acres of soybeans and 800 acres of corn, reverse that, 800 acres of soybeans and 400 acres of corn, you're going to have a totally different guarantee than you have this year. Everybody see that? Yes?
Did I catch you right? Now we're using actual planted acres and not base acres.
Yes, we're using actual planted acres. That's where we start from, but we're prorating it back. That's what the prorating is about, is getting it back to base acres. But it starts with what you planted. And those ratios are going to change depending on what you plant. And for that reason, your guarantee is based on what you planted, and therefore, in the economic world, that doesn't meet the definition of a decoupled payment. See, with the county program, you plant wheat on corn base, and you get the corn payment, period. It doesn't matter what happens with wheat. You get the corn payment, period. Here, you're basically determining the guarantee based on what you plant. Now, I can't imagine we won't get challenged in the World Court of Trade Agreements over this. But I've also seen how lawyers argue too. At least down where I'm from. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client did not shoot him. But at the end of this trial, if you discover that my client did shoot him, it will be clear to you that bastard needed killing. And I assure you, there's a lawyer out there somewhere who can make an argument that that is not a decoupled payment, even though it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, and it quacks like a duck. It is still not a decoupled payment. But nonetheless, we don't have to worry about that. That's somebody's higher pay scales going to deal with that. Anyway, if we take 33% of the gross revenue from the soybeans to get to our benchmark revenue from 154, that makes our combined benchmark revenue $631. We add those two numbers together. Now, your guarantee is 86% of the benchmark revenue, which now is this combined weighted benchmark revenue, weighted by how you plant it, okay? We're going to plug that 86% in, because it's an 86% guarantee of 63, 64, and you come up with 543. What's going to count against it is the combined revenue of both crops. Combined revenue of both crops. So if the soybeans make and the corn don't do so good, you may still end up with no payment, because there'll be enough revenue from the soybeans to offset it. Okay? Now, 10%, you know what this program really looks like to me? I hope they're not true. Full employment for FSA. I mean, how can, you know, if a lot of people go into this, they gotta have more people. There's no way they can make this operate. I don't care what the conservatives say on this one. There's just no way. It just can't be done. So I'm not supposed to encourage you to go into this, but nonetheless, I'm telling you what's in there. I'm giving you the exact math that's in there so you can make your own determination. And I have been surprised after some of this stuff's been run through computer models. More farms than I expected came up with this program. Now, you may still not want to go there because you're going to put a lot of constraint on your time too. You're going to spend a lot of time in the FSA office. Your time is valuable. And is the payment going to be enough more to justify your time? And it might not be. So that's the other factor you have to think. We'll come back. Same story, 10% stop loss. 10% of the benchmark revenue, combined revenue, by the way, is $63.16, maximum payment in this program period. That's per payment acre, by the way. You don't get paid on all acres. Okay, the actual revenue to count is the higher of that price. We don't know it today that we will have on the 1st of October. The higher of that price on October 1st. We don't know it today, but in our example, we're using 360. That's higher than loan rates. The 165 number here is the bushels produced on your farm. That is not a county yield. That is the actual yield that you produced on your farm, period. Times the 360, $594 is the revenue to count under the corn. Now that's a gross amount. We've got to prorate all this stuff. So that's just the starting point. Do the same with soybeans. We're using $10 in our example times the 25 bushels. Actual farm yield produced, that's $250 worth of revenue. Now, steps 38 through 39 are the formulas that we've got to allocate those between the two crops. Got to prorate them. Back to that business again. So we're taking 67%, and that 67% likely will change next year because you'll change your planting pattern. So that ratio is going to change. But right now it's 66% or 67% times the 594, $396 of that corn revenue will count. Do the same with the soybeans. And we total it up. There's $479 worth of revenue to count against the guarantee after you've done the prorated shares. If you think this is difficult now, you should have tried to read this when it was still in legal language before FSA actually put it out into a form that I can kind of figure out. And what was throwing me off is they kept telling me it was decoupled. I mean, I'm talking about aggression rates, of course. No, this is decoupled. It's decoupled. Well, if you got a storyline, you have to stick with it. If you work for somebody in DC, they got a storyline from their boss, and you all speak the same storyline. Whether it's exactly correct or not is not relevant. So I kept thinking this was decoupled. Once I realized it wasn't decoupled, it kind of fell into place. Anyway, we go ahead and we bring that 479 down, and we deduct it from the guarantee that's been weighted at 543 minus the 479. The difference is $63.88. Do we get paid that? Well, we have to bring down the 10% stop loss, and it's slightly lower at $63.16, just a few pennies less. So in this case, we're still at the 10% stop loss. We put that in. We multiply it times all the base acres, 1,000, times 65%. Remember, the others were 85. At 65%, that's in statute, will not change during the life of the farm. We multiply the 1,000 acres times the 63.16 times 65%, and you come up with a combined payment of $41,056. Now, if you do go this route, you have to report your yields every year, you have to report acres every year, you have to go in after you get it planted and report all of that in order to get your guarantee established for this program at the FSA office. Okay? Okay. Well, let's talk about the economics that you can now go home and calculate every one of these payments. And if you need or want more help, I will get to that in a minute on management. Okay, what I'm looking at here is Redwood County corn. And the 5-year Olympic average county yield for this county is 170 bushels. 170 bushels. Okay, or at least that is what it is in year one. Down this column, you'll notice are the PLC payments, and it's based solely on the marketing year average price. So, in order for PLC to pay, the price has to drop below the reference price. Y'all remember what the reference price is? $3.70. So any price above $3.70, your PLC payment is automatically zero. So once we drop below the $3.70 number, like here at $3.61, we got a 9-cent payment rate. We went through that math, and that would work. The 9 cents times the yield up here would give you a payment rate of $15.30, and then that's per payment acre. You didn't have to multiply it by the percent of acres you get paid on. You may have more acres than that planted, but it doesn't have base, and you do have fully based. You're only paid on 85% of those base acres for these two programs. By the way, all that math we went through, what you did was calculate one cell in this spreadsheet. One cell. So if you want, you can hand calculate every number in this matrix if you'd like to. Okay? There's probably one guy in the room who wants to do that. I know the other 99% of you don't, but if you want to, you can. Okay? Now, as you go across here, notice that he is getting bigger payments from the Ark County unless he gets a yield, and not he, the county has a yield substantially higher than the Olympic average. At 204, we are getting less. We're still getting more than you get from PLC, as it turns out, but we are not getting the maximum payment of $89. If we're at 187 bushels, which is higher than the average, we are getting the full payment. So you can have higher yield if we are at a 361 price. Now, if you get a higher price, say 490, you see even with an average yield, you're not getting the payment. If we have 490 corn price, there is no payment unless the county has a yield loss. Your county yield has to be below the payment, and obviously there's no PLC payment at 490. Everybody understand that? There's that trade-off. Okay? So, looking down here, if you raise an average yield, in other words,